I'm Kimberly Fernandez, Betsy's mother. Betsy was born prematurely at about 30 weeks gestation after a complicated pregnancy and had a prolonged stay in the neonatal intensive care unit with multiple problems, including an intraventricular hemorrhage and heart surgery. And when she came home from the hospital, she did okay until about 7 months old when she developed an unusual epileptic syndrome. And since then, she's failed to reach milestones and has a diagnosis of spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and later we found out she also has a genetic mutation called SYNGAP1. She has to be fed and changed. She can't sit up by herself or walk. She's able to roll over and get around a little bit, but
It's, she can talk, but she's able to communicate, saying yes and smiling and saying yeah when she doesn't like it. So,
yeah. And for the caregivers that you have had that, hasn't been yourself, how has that experience been throughout her life?
It's been hit and miss. We've had several excellent caretakers and a few that were not very well trained or terribly interested in the job.
You've handed off the caretaking to now a service?
Yes, she lives in what's called supported care. So she has her own place to live, and she has round-the-clock caregivers who are in charge of feeding, bathing, doing laundry, grocery shopping, taking her to doctor's appointments. My husband Sergio and I, we supervise all of that, but we don't necessarily do it.
So tell us a little bit about the story of what happened and why, Sergio, Dad, you started the training module, and what was the impetus behind?
well, a few years ago, Betsy ended up in the ICU for 10 days, and she was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And after that, for about a year, she was in the hospital like monthly. So, and that, I was very frustrated about it because, we kept going to the hospital. And then I realized that the problem was lack of training. If you don't know, you might have the best of intentions, you might have the physical strength, but if you don't know what you're doing taking care of Betsy, she might, be hurt by that. She might end up, in the hospital.
The risks that she has is she could choke on her food. She could aspirate her food down into her lungs. She also has very sluggish bowels, so you have to keep track of her bowel movements and make sure she empties out on a regular basis. She has frequent urinary tract infections.
It's very hard with Betsy because you don't know that anything is wrong. And by the time you know, things can be very wrong. So, like in that case, when she ended up in the ICU in the morning, we went out to breakfast with her, and she was a little distressed. But then she kept shaking. So we went to the hospital, took some X-ray, and she had a collapse lung. So I talked to a friend of mine that does training for a living, and he suggested this system where you do the different tasks that you have to do for Betsy, and then divided on the steps, and then explain to the person that's going to be training each one of those steps, and then explain to them the consequences of what happens if the steps are not done properly. And that's how you train people. The other thing that I found out with people with special needs is that they are very different. Betsy is totally different from any other patients or even kids with the same syndrome that she has. So this has to be tailored for everybody, and it's not a commercial product in the sense that, like for vision, there's tons of products because there's a lot of people that will buy it. You have to actually make the training specifically for each one of them. So that's where we set up to design a training system that can be customized for each one of the patients.
Yeah. And her wheelchair is different from other people's wheelchairs. You have to strap things in differently. Her toilet chair is also different from others because it was custom made for her, and it's not difficult, but you do need to learn how to use it and how to angle it, how to put the brakes on.
She was in the hospital for 2 weeks, 10 days in the ICU. That's a few $100,000 that some insurance company had to pay. And then she went to the hospital monthly for how many months?
Several times.
I mean, lots of them. So every time you walk into the ER, it got to the point that we knew the people in the ER by name. So that's expensive, you know. It's the kind of friends that are very expensive to make.
Yeah, that's something you don't want to know people by name, is unless you
Or
work.
you want to be known by them in the ER. That's for sure.
I think close to 100% of that could have been prevented. I think the pneumonia could have been prevented if we had been able to prevent choking on the food. I think all of her UTIs could have been prevented by a routine of putting her on the toilet and cleaning things with proper hygiene. Close to 100%. I mean, people do get these things even when they don't have a diagnosis like Betsy, but most of these are preventable.
Yeah, and you're speaking not just as a mom, but as a doctor.
Right, that's correct. And
From this perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to see happen going forward with the trainees? How would you like them to be able to react to situations where they might not know the knowledge for something? I know it can be intimidating to ask you're Betsy's parents, and they don't want to admit that they have maybe not understood the training fully. But how would you like to see?
Well, you know, have it as a resource for them to go and check it out. You know, unfortunately, the kind of people that work with Betsy are usually, some of them are students that are going through school and they take the job for a year, and then somebody else has to come in, and then somebody else to have in. So rotation is high. And what you want to make sure is that when you get a new person there, they have the proper instruction to start doing a good job, and they can go back and check it whenever they need to.